Hey everyone, it's John here from Room 100, and I decided that since it's March, in the spirit of March Madness, I wanted to make a bracket based on people's most wanted newcomers for Smash. So, welcome to March Smashness. Kind of a better name on paper than it is to say out loud, but whatever, we're gonna go for it. What I want to do with this video is share my method for creating the bracket, as well as my own personal take on the bracket, going through and choosing my most wanted newcomers. I've put a link in the description where you can get a blank template, not only as a PNG but also the original Photoshop file if you want to get really fancy with it. And I also linked the original Twitter thread where I posted this, so you can get it there if you want to as well. So first, let's talk about the setup of the bracket. To determine people's most wanted newcomers, it's kind of an impossible task, but I decided to pull from two main sources, being Source Gaming's Mega Smash Poll Ultimate, which they posted in June of 2020, as well as the Global Smash Roster, which is a site online where people can vote for their most wanted fighters. The idea was that I would use these polls to gauge people's most wanted fighters, combine them in a way that made them even and fair, and form a list of the top 32 most wanted from there that I could use for the bracket. There's a little bit of weirdness that I had to account for in doing so. For Source Gaming, like I said, this was done in June of 2020, so it's still pretty accurate and pretty recent, but there are a couple changes that had to be made because it is outdated. And for Global Smash Roster, it's just kind of hard to gauge. There's a couple of really weird things, like there are 5 TF2 characters on there, 3 of which made it to the bracket and 2 of which were seeded out, but still there's a lot of TF2 on there and just a couple of really weird choices that I never see anywhere else, and it's hard for me to say or if any of those are like meme or joke picks that a lot of people bandwagoned on, or if these are genuinely really popular characters. But it's not my place to say. I can't make that judgment call. So if they were seated high, they're on the bracket. I also had to adjust some of the original rankings, which means removing confirmed newcomers. The only people that affected were Steve and Pyra. Technically, it was always Rex and Pyra. Either way, those two I had to take out and basically move other people up. I don't think Sephiroth really affected anything. And the other thing that some people might call me on is that I removed confirmed Mii costumes for Fighter Pass 2, which means that Travis and Gino were taken out. I tried not to lean too hard into fan rules, which means I kept characters who are assist trophies, who are already spirits, or who are costumes that are already in the game before Fighters Pass 2. I left all of them on there, but I did want this to sort of reflect characters who could still come to Smash, and I think if it's a character who has gotten a paid costume in Fighter Pass 2, I don't think they're coming to the game. I could be wrong, and it could be total crap, but I did feel like it was appropriate to take Travis and Gino out, unfortunately. So once I got those final placements, I basically went through and added the two numbers together. So if a character was ranked 15 in Source Gaming's and like 17 in the Global Smash roster, then they would have a total score of 32. Once I gave everybody that total, I then ranked them from 1 to 32, and that was the final seeding for the bracket. Some of these are obviously a little weird and have some recency bias to them, but again, I'm just solely going off of the numbers, and these are the characters who made it on. There are certain characters who are popular enough on one poll or the other to not really be affected by the other one. I did try to implement a penalty for any character who only made it onto one of the polls and not the other, but for some of them it literally just didn't affect it. Like they scored high enough on one poll that it didn't matter that they didn't show up on the other. There are some characters I'm pretty surprised didn't make it on here, despite how frequently they are mentioned in Smash speculation. So there were characters who were seeded out, like Monster Hunter is probably the biggest one for me. And I guess now, if we're following my rule, they couldn't have made it onto the bracket anyway because of those new Mii costumes. Well, not new, but you know, the Mii costumes that are now in Fighter Pass 2. Either way, those are characters who were brought up a lot, so I was surprised that they didn't make it to top 32. They were seeded out. They did appear on the polls, but were seeded out, very much like Soul Bad Guy, Shell from Portal, and Professor Layton. All of those were characters who appeared on one poll but not the other, and because of that, they didn't make the cut. In the vein of the TF2 characters in Shell, I'm really surprised Gordon Freeman wasn't anywhere to be seen here. He was a lot lower than a lot of these other characters, and again, Global Smash roster did kind of push things very predominantly towards TF2, but I'm still surprised he wasn't higher up there. And then for me personally, I was pretty surprised that Chosen Undead didn't make the cut either. I do remember seeing him at least on Source Gaming's poll, and I think he's a really cool character who's like more likely than you would expect, but again, I'm surprised that we didn't see him on the bracket. The only other thing I want to say is that there is a really small amount of first parties here, and I guess the whole thing about the polls is that they're built around people's dream characters, and a lot of those dreams are really big, like these huge third-party ads. So it makes sense to me that we didn't see like a new Pokemon or a new Zelda character. I think Skull Kid did get seeded out, but he was there at least. Regardless, I am a little surprised by the lack of first party, despite how frequently, again, they come up in speculation. So with all that said and done, let's jump into the bracket and my personal choices for these matchups. I didn't intentionally place characters in a certain area, like there's no real theme like some brackets do, but even disregarding that, there's some really fun matchups that occur naturally, randomly with this seeding, whether it's right away or just in the rounds that follow. All right, so let's jump in. So the first matchup we have here is the big #1 seed, ranked super high on both polls, Crash Bandicoot versus Hat Kid, the 32 seed from A Hat in Time. These two actually work pretty well against each other. You have Crash, this big platforming icon, kind of emblematic of the era of Sony versus Nintendo versus Sega. Huge, obviously, some people's most wanted character. Matching that up with Hat Kid, a newer platforming character who is still very popular. Game was very well liked from what I know, but is instead hailing from the indie side of things, a lot smaller of an origin. I don't have direct gameplay experience with either of these two characters. I think both could be interesting, but for the name appeal and for the iconicness of the character, I'm going to have Crash win this one. Hat Kid, I'm sure if I played through the games, would have a really interesting moveset, and I know that there are a bunch of movesets out there for Hat Kid, but I think at this point Crash is just such a huge character that Crash would be really cool to see in Smash. Then moving on, we have Spyro the Dragon versus Paper Mario. No real direct connection here, but kind of characters who I do see brought up a lot, but aren't necessarily first picks. For example, like Spyro, I feel like usually is not preferred over Crash, and Paper Mario isn't usually preferred over like Waluigi or Geno. But I do think both these characters actually have a lot of moveset potential. The idea of like a quadrupedal dragon character is really cool. I think you could have a lot of fun with that and be really visually distinct in the rest of the Smash roster. Meanwhile, Paper Mario would also be very visually distinct, but also has the potential to get out of the formula that Mario and Dr. Mario and even Luigi use. Like, I think there's a ton of really unique moveset ideas that you could pull from that. So both of these characters are really cool. This is a lot closer of a matchup for me than Crash and Hat Kid, but I think I'm going to move Spyro forward. The character design is kind of what is putting me over here. Then moving on, we have the #1 seed from the Global Smash roster, which is the Heavy from TF2 versus Ryu Hayabusa from Ninja Gaiden. Both kind of mature characters, both characters who fill a pretty specific niche for Heavy. It helps to represent first-person shooters and shooting characters in general, and Ryu Hayabusa is the prototypical ninja. Either of them would be really cool to have on the roster, but I'm not going to waste too much time here. I'm going to put Ryu Hayabusa forward. Ryu Hayabusa is like, it's just one of those characters, maybe the most on this list for me personally, where it's like, how is he not in Smash at this point in some way, as a costume, with a spirit event, or as a newcomer? Ryu Hayabusa just has so much history back on the NES, and just being the ninja of gaming, I think that he fully deserves to move forward here. Then we have two popular female characters, being Shantae and Arl from Puyo Puyo. Again, I don't have any history with either of these franchises. I haven't played either of them. With Shantae, you obviously have an indie character getting into Smash, which would be great. She's already there as a spirit, and there's lots of really fun transformation things you could do with her genie powers. versus Arl, who comes from Puyo Puyo, which is a puzzle game. And I think a puzzle character would have to work really uniquely and interestingly in Smash. Obviously, Puyo Puyo has done things with Tetris. And besides Dr. Mario, which is like a non-factor, we just don't have any kind of puzzly characters in the roster. So she would be really cool as well. And I think for that really unique gameplay angle, I would put Arl forward. Both of them are pretty cool, but Arl's a character that consistently kind of comes up every now and then. And I do think, again, the puzzle game angle in a moveset would be really cool. Then we have Dante from Devil May Cry versus Amaterasu from Okami. I've not played either of these games, and this is probably one of the lesser attachment areas I have here. I'm not particularly pulled to either of these characters. Dante is really heavily requested, pretty highly seated, but I think he'd be cool, but I haven't seen how he would be fully super different from some of the other characters on the roster. Whereas Amaterasu, there's a really interesting art style there. Again, quadruped would be really fun, especially with a bigger kind of wolf character. There's a lot of fun things you could do there, so I'm actually going to put Amaterasu forward here. Again, the character design, I'm really looking for more unique character designs. I'm kind of tired of just like bipedal people. And I would really like to see some more uniqueness there. Then we have Raymu from the Toho games versus Shadow the Hedgehog from the Sonic franchise. I have more personal connection here to Shadow because I did play some Shadow the Hedgehog as a kid, but also have played some other Sonic games here and there. Meanwhile, I've not played a Toho game. Shadow is probably, I know for a time Shadow was very heavily requested because people were thinking he could be an Echo Fighter, maybe in the Crom way where you switch up a couple of the specials for other existing ones. And I think Shadow would be cool to have, but he's definitely not my most wanted Sonic character. And from what I understand of the Toho games, they're very like bullet helly, and I think that could provide a really interesting gameplay angle similar to Puyo Puyo and Arl. So I'm actually going to have Raymu move forward here. Also, I've listened to a lot of the Toho music and it is amazing. So that's what's going to put Raymu forward here. Then we have the Knight from Hollow Knight versus Dixie Kong from the Donkey Kong games. Before I just completely give the win to the Knight here, I will say for Dixie Kong, very highly requested, one of the few first parties to still make it onto the bracket. Could share some aspects with Diddy Kong while still being her own very unique character. Has the ponytail and I think a bubblegum gun. There's lots of interesting things that you could do with Dixie Kong. And I think that she does deserve to be on the roster as a first party character and help to fill out some of those lesser represented franchises. She feels like one of the last Donkey Kong characters who really should be there. But it's going to the Knight here. I won't elaborate too much yet. Because I think the Knight's going to go pretty far here. A super deserving indie character who somehow hasn't been seen as like a Mii sword fighter yet. And I love Hollow Knight. The art style and the characters are great, so the Knight's going to move forward here. And finally, for the left side, we have Waluigi versus Monokuma from the Danganronpa games. Again, I'm not going to fault anybody's character choices or their most wanted newcomers here. From what I have seen, maybe Monokuma is like a meme pick for some people. But in the same way, Waluigi is also a meme pick for some people, while having some very worthy moveset potential and feeling like he should be on the roster. So I'm not going to say too much from either of these characters from like the joke side, because they both could have tons of potential. The problem is that I don't really know what Monokuma's potential would be, and I do genuinely think that Waluigi would be a really fun fitting character for the roster. I was very surprised when Ultimate got revealed that he was still an assist trophy, because there's so much fun you could do with him. He could represent so many of the party in sports games. So I'm putting Waluigi forward here. So moving on, this is probably the toughest first round matchup for me. On the right side here, we have Doomslayer from Doom versus Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. These are both characters who I would love to see in the game. For Doomslayer, you obviously get the huge representation of the FPS genre, which just isn't existent on the roster right now. Like you have like Samus, kind of Snake, and Mega Man, those like gunner characters, but none of them fill the niche that a true FPS character like Doomslayer would. And then you also have Scorpion from Mortal Kombat, one of the biggest fighting game franchises, and coming from the West, which is also a fun new addition. Same with Doomslayer. And both these characters also share in common the really intense gore and violence that their series bring. Which presents its own unique hurdle for these characters getting into Smash. It's not really a competition in the end because I'm putting Doomslayer forward. He's just an amazing character choice, and I can't believe that FPS characters aren't seen in the roster really at all. But Scorpion would be super fun. I would love a Mortal Kombat rep, whether it would be Scorpion or Sub-Zero, Shang Tsung, whatever. I think Mortal Kombat in Smash would be really cool for the music alone, but Doom has amazing music to spare, so Doomslayer's going to move forward. Then we have Tails from the Sonic games versus Scout from TF2. Not a ton of connection to either of these characters, and I'm not going to waste too much time here. I'm putting Tails forward. None of the TF2 characters are probably going to move forward. I don't see it as likely. There's other Valve characters who I'd be really excited to get into Smash. I actually plan to talk about this at some point in the future and just weighing all of the Valve characters' possibilities and moveset ideas, things like that. But for now, I think Tails could be really interesting, combining some aspects of like a normal Sonic moveset with some of the more tech stuff. So Tails is going to move forward. Then we have two more mature characters, being Master Chief from Halo and 2B from Nier Automata. I think either of these characters are more likely than you would expect because they already have some ties with Nintendo and Smash. Master Chief obviously is from Microsoft, who has gotten Banjo and Steve into the game, so they have a pretty good relationship right now. And 2B comes from Platinum and Square Enix, I believe, both of which have characters in Smash, and Platinum has been working with Nintendo a lot recently. So I think both have cool moveset ideas. Both could very well get into Smash, but I'm giving it to Master Chief. The Halo series is one of my favorites. Not so much new games, but the original trilogy and Reach were huge for me. So Master Chief is moving forward, and also, again, hoping to represent the FPS genre. Then we have Phoenix Wright from the Ace Attorney series and Lloyd Irving from the Tales of series. I think this matchup was made specifically to spurn Pizza Dude Man Guy. I think he likes both of these characters a lot. These are two characters who are really heavily requested and have been for a while. Lloyd Irving got in as a Mii costume in Smash 4 and is yet to be seen yet. It's more than likely that he does return, but I was happy that he didn't return yet to already outdate this bracket. Meanwhile, on that topic, I think a Phoenix Wright Brawler costume would also be amazing, but this is about coming in as a fresh newcomer, and I personally would prefer Phoenix Wright. I think there's a lot of weird, wacky moveset possibilities with him. He's already been seen in Marvel vs. Capcom, so he can work in this kind of environment. And mainly with Lloyd, it's nothing against him personally as a character, but we have so many JRPG characters now that, like, it would be cool to see all these huge JRPGs represented in Smash, but in terms of moveset potential, I would really like to explore different genres. Then we have Rayman versus the Imposter from Among Us. This is the most recency biased character for sure on the roster, with how big Among Us is right now, or at least was recently. I've definitely been seeing less of it. It's not a huge challenge for me. I'm going to put Rayman forward. I think he has a lot of moveset potential. He's been super heavily requested. He'd be a really fun platformer character to have in the game, and with like the detached limbs, there's lots of silly things that you could do. Whereas the Imposter, I've seen fun moveset ideas, but I really actually don't see the moveset potential. I was considering trying to make a moveset, and I just couldn't make it happen, even against other kind of similar characters, vague avatar characters like the Fall Guy. I found that the Fall Guy worked a lot better than the Imposter when it came to a moveset. Then we have Eggman from the Sonic franchise, lots of Sonic on this list, versus Isaac from Golden Sun. Isaac was, I think, one of the most anticipated characters leading up to the launch of the game. People were really hoping that Isaac would come back and not just be an assist trophy. Unfortunately, he was. Versus Eggman is another kind of recent pick, just like Imposter, but mainly because of Sephiroth, with, you know, more big bads getting into the game like Ridley and K. Rool and Sephiroth. People are really hoping that we can see Eggman to kind of round that out and just have some of the biggest villains in Smash. And I love more villains in Smash as well. While I do think he is a fairly recently promoted idea, I do think Eggman would be great. The idea of like a mech moveset moveset is something that we touched on in Ready Moveset Go episode 6. I think he has a lot of uniqueness, a lot of potential, is very distinct visually. And I have also seen pretty good movesets for Isaac, also on Ready Moveset Go. Actually, that one was episode 9. I think I'm gonna have to go Eggman here. Eggman is actually a character I've been thinking about a lot, and I would really enjoy in Smash. Then we have Sora from Kingdom Hearts versus Soldier from TF2. Like I said, TF2 is not getting very far here, so I am going to go Sora. I think it's a character who I do really like, and I think he has a ton of potential. I did make a moveset for him with my friend, but mostly I'm putting him forward here because it would make my friend really happy. And then finally, we have Bandana Waddle D, the last first party pick here, versus Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight, the other indie character on this list to be represented in Smash already as an assist trophy, which was huge as a reveal. And then Bandana Waddle D, one of the most wanted first party characters for a very long time. Character that people feel would round out the Kirby franchise in a really nice way, have those 4 main characters there. I think Shovel Knight has a lot of really cool moveset potential and is very iconic, but I also think Shovel Knight's time has passed a little bit. I'm sure we'll be seeing more Shovel Knight in the future, but Shovel Knight coming in during the Smash 4 time, or like as a base game newcomer, I think was a more appropriate time for him to appear. And while it's not a limitation for the bracket, I do think them putting Shovel Knight as an assist trophy is kind of the most they would want to do for him. Meanwhile, Bandana D would be great to appear, and I think there's tons of unique moves that they could do with the spear. I think it'd be different from the other Kirby characters and other weapon fighters in the game in general. So Bandana D wins this one. Moving on to round 2, we start out with a big matchup, Crash versus Spyro. 2 characters both coming from Activision, I believe. Both pretty requested. Obviously, Crash is more requested. He's seated higher. But 2 characters that people would be very, very excited about, who have also had a pretty big presence on Switch recently as well. This is another kind of tough one for me because I think Crash probably wins with the iconicness angle again because of just how big of a platforming mascot and icon that he is. But I think moveset wise, I would be a little more interested in Spyro again because of the character build with the dragon angle and what you could do with that. Both of these characters have a lot of really good things going for them, so I would be happy with either. But again, I think because of that iconicness, because of all the hype and energy behind Crash right now, I think Crash is going to win this one for me. Then we have Ryu Hayabusa and Arl. While I do think a puzzle moveset would be really interesting in Smash, I do really want Ryu Hayabusa in the game to kind of fill out those classic NES icons, as well as have a really interesting ninja moveset in the game besides like Sheik and Greninja. So Ryu Hayabusa wins this one. Then we have Amaterasu and Reimu. Again, 2 characters who I don't really have a strong personal connection with, but I think Bullet Hell would be a really interesting gameplay motif, so I'm going to give it to Reimu. And then we have the Knight versus Waluigi. While I do think Waluigi is one of the more deserving Mario characters, has a ton of moveset potential, could be really interesting, and is obviously really wanted despite all the stupid meme stuff, I'm giving it to the Knight here. The Knight also has a ton of moveset potential, is really big right now. With nearly any Nintendo presentation happening right now, people are clamoring for more Silk Song information. So the series and everything in Team Cherry's doing right now is just massive right now. The Knight is a great character. Would really feel appropriate as like the indie character to be playable in Smash, I think. So the Knight is moving forward here. Then we have Doomslayer versus Tails. Despite all of the kind of interesting things that Tails could do, it's Doomslayer. Let's move on. Then we have Master Chief versus Phoenix Wright. This one is closer than Doomslayer and Tails, but still the FPS genre getting into Smash would be huge for me. And this and Doom are 2 series that I do love. Phoenix Wright would be a really cool one, but again, I would kind of be happier to see Phoenix Wright as a Mii costume, so Master Chief moves forward. Then we have Rayman versus Eggman, the Battle of the Mans, and I think both of them have some really interesting moves that they could bring to Smash in different ways that they would fight, and they're both very heavily requested. But I think the idea of a mech fighter in Smash and like all of the different technology that Eggman could bring to the game, as well as being an iconic villain, does win out over Rayman for me. Rayman, I do love Rayman Legends. He's cool, but he's kind of another character like Shovel Knight where I feel like his time has passed a little bit, and so I would definitely prefer Eggman. at this point. Then we have Sora versus Bandana Waddle D. While I do think Bandana Waddle D is a really cool character and one of the more deserving first parties that could get added to Smash, again, I'm going to put Sora forward here. Kingdom Hearts is a really big franchise, and seeing Sora in Smash would be awesome, and I think he could do a lot of cool things. But really, they're pretty evenly tied with, I think, the kind of moveset that they could bring to Smash. It's nothing revolutionary, but it would still be really interesting, so I'm going to go for just the overall kind of bigger character for me, and that's going to be Sora. Then we have Crash versus Ryu Hayabusa, and this is probably where I'm going to differ from a lot of people, because the first seed is going to lose here. I'm putting forward Ryu Hayabusa. I think they are both icons in their own right. More people are probably familiar with Crash than Ryu Hayabusa at this point, but it's just that NES angle, man, and that like super iconic stereotypical ninja that I would love to see in Smash. I would really love either of these characters, but personally Ryu Hayabusa just seems like a character that should be in Smash. It's so weird, especially with how much Nintendo's been working with Koei Tecmo recently. I can't imagine we don't see Ryu Hayabusa in some form at some point. Whereas Crash being a Western character, there's a couple more roadblocks in the way, where I wouldn't be surprised if we saw Crash, but Ryu Hayabusa just feels like he should be in Smash. Then we have Rayman versus the Knight. The Knight's moving forward here. This whole bottom section was just people for the Knight to beat out. The Knight's just such a huge character for me that none of these characters really stood a chance, honestly. This is probably the roughest part of the seeding, at least for me personally. Then we have the big one, probably two of my most wanted characters and from my most wanted gaming genre to be represented in Smash. Doomslayer versus Master Chief. If you want to see my full opinions on this kind of matchup of which should get into Smash, you can check out my Master Chief moveset, and at the end I compare these two based on music, stage, spirits, moveset, all of that. But to give a summary, Halo 3 is my favorite game ever. I do love Master Chief. I think he is the overall more iconic character. Like, just more people will know who Master Chief is in general. Meanwhile, Doomslayer is more of the legacy FPS character. He carries the history of the FPS genre with him as such a huge character for it, along with the recent resurgence with Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. Doomslayer has been making his way into the public mindset in his own right, especially with the Halo series not being as big as it used to be, and us kind of just waiting for Infinite, which is kind of taking the game in a different angle, it seems like. I think these two are on more even grounds than you would expect. I'm not sure what Nintendo would go with. I think the relationship with Microsoft would benefit Master Chief getting in the game, but then again, Microsoft owns Bethesda now, and both of these characters would kind of be coming from Microsoft at this point. They would probably want to push their own guy, but I think in general, Doomslayer deserves to be in more just because of the history with gaming, and I also think from a moveset and gameplay angle, Doomslayer would be more interesting because of the fast, aggressive nature of the Doom series versus Master Chief and Halo being a bit slower and it just not having the same feel for a fighting game. So Doomslayer moves forward here, just like in my Master Chief moveset video, but either of these characters I would lose my mind over. Then we have Eggman versus Sora, and this is the part where I annoy my friend and I pick Eggman. And I think Sora is a huge character that would be amazing to have in Smash just from like the name power of it. But I gotta go back to the moveset, and the mech moveset would be really interesting and unique in Smash, along with Eggman being an icon in his own right as a villain. So I have to put Eggman forward here. I think Sora has some really cool ideas that you could do for his moveset, but it's still, there's, especially with Hero, I think hurts my opinion of Sora a little bit because Hero has the whole menu and MP thing, and there's just certain aspects where I think Sora would get a little too close to other Square Enix characters, so I'm putting Eggman forward. Now for semifinals, so these are all characters that I do really want in Smash. We have Ryu Hayabusa versus the Knight, and this is a tough one. Again, Ryu Hayabusa feels like he should be in Smash. The Knight is, in my opinion, one of the last indie characters to not be seen in Smash in some way who really needs to get in there, and I have to wonder why we haven't seen the Knight yet. I think he's super likely as a newcomer? No, especially not compared to Ryu Hayabusa. Both of these characters have, I think, interesting but not revolutionary movesets. They're both kind of swordy. Ryu Hayabusa obviously has the quicker ninja angle, while the knight is a little more bouncy, a smaller stature, and has all the soul stuff to work with. So I am going to go with the knight. I would love an indie character in Smash, and again, Hollow Knight is a huge franchise for me, much bigger than Ninja Gaiden is. I have only played part of the first one, and it annoyed me greatly. So even though Ryu is a huge gaming icon, I think the Knight moves forward in my bracket. And then we have Doomslayer versus Eggman, both presenting really unique gameplay ideas, but again, that FPS genre, I'm putting Doomslayer forward. And then for the finals, we have the Knight versus Doomslayer. And unfortunately, it's not as close as you would hope the finals would be, but I'm going to give both of the characters their fair due. So with the Knight, you have a huge indie gaming icon. Hollow Knight and the anticipated follow-up Silk Song are both huge in gaming right now. People have really latched onto not only the game but these characters. People love the Knight, people love Hornet. So I think any Hollow Knight rep getting into Smash would be huge. Again, it is an indie character, whereas some of the biggest competitors have already been deconfirmed. You had the Sans costume, the Cuphead costume. You have Shovel Knight as an assist trophy. You have Shantae as a spirit. There's a lot of indie characters in Smash who otherwise would, I think, rival the Knight to get in, but besides a few like quote from Cave Story or like maybe a few others, the Knight is just the biggest indie character that I could think about getting into Smash right now. So I would really love to see him in. I think he would fit in very easily with the mechanics of his game. And I would be super hyped for it. And some amazing music, some great stage potential, costumes, spirits. Hollow Knight would bring so much cool stuff to Smash. And then we have Doomslayer. It has had a problem for a while fighting in terms of iconography with Master Chief, but I think recently with how big Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal are, I think he's kind of back up there, and they have reworked his design a little bit to make him a little more bright and colorful, especially with the way they've reworked the classic costume as well. I think that would fit right into Smash. A really unique gameplay angle. He'd be super aggressive and fast while not being too light. He'd definitely be a force to be reckoned with. Either of these characters could have some form of an ammo mechanic if you really wanted to. With Hollow Knight, it'd be the soul, and for Doomslayer, it'd be actual ammo. Again, amazing music and stages and spirits. You have to probably work around some of the hell stuff and some of the bloodier stuff in Doom, but I really don't think that's too much of an issue, especially not as much as people make it out to be. So these are two characters who, in their own rights, would be amazing in Smash. Both huge non-Japanese characters to get in. Again, I just with all the games I've played in my lifetime, I inherently would love to see a first-person character. The ultimate winner of this bracket is Doomslayer. So that concludes my March Smashness bracket. Let me know what you think. I would love to see your brackets. If you want to post them to Twitter and tag me at Room100ENT. You can also just reply to the original tweet, which is again linked in the description of this video. And again, there's a really nice Photoshop template if you want to use that for yourself. I have a really big Rates and Ravings video coming at the end of the month talking about WandaVision and Mario 3D World Bowser's Fury. So be sure to check that out. And then next month we have a really cool episode of Ready Moveset Go for you for our 10th episode. So lots of cool things coming. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to see all of that stuff. And as always, thanks for watching.